happiness for me was when something came into my life that was just felt great to me, and I'd hold on to it and then it would change. It would be like something ugly would pop up its head and take away my happiness, which I know is not the way happiness is supposed to be. It's supposed to be more how we feel, but that's what would happen with me. So you've probably heard all of this before about happiness. And as I said, you probably have a better handle on happiness than I do, because maybe some of you have been searching this out your whole existence and have gotten a better handle on happiness. But there are so many definitions about the meaning of happiness, and even the topic of happiness versus joy. The basic definition for happiness is good fortune, contentment, pleasure, and joy. Joy, in turn, is described as an emotion of great delight and happiness caused by something exceptionally good or satisfying. So after reading these definitions, I have to be honest with you, I didn't see the difference between them. It really meant nothing to me. It didn't resonate with me like, oh, now I get it. I didn't get it. What I did know was that they were both positive emotions: joy, happiness, positive. We all need positive in our life right now. So I'm ready. I was like so ready to explore how to get to this point of continual happiness, which I now know doesn't really exist. When I went to other sources to get a clearer picture of their meaning, I found out that happiness is external. It revolves around things coming to us, coming to me. It's basically circumstances based on what we consider to be a wrinkle-free life. Now, I know none of us have a wrinkle-free life. As good as my life is, and as good as your may be, or as difficult, it's not a constant. It's never wrinkle-free. Well, no wonder none of us can say we have continual happiness. How can you have continual happiness if you always feel like you're trying to create the perfect life? Well, we can't create a perfect life. It doesn't exist. So further explanations on joy brings us to the thought pattern that joy is internal, described as being more Christ-based. For our purposes, I'm going to say spiritual. I don't really want to put it as Christ. I'm saying spiritual. So think of it in terms of that. Spiritual is not based on variables, and it exists within us. It exists internally, as we talked about before. Other explanations for joy were, joy is the fruit of the Spirit, which I now really do understand what that means. Again, very internal. So those explanations really meant a lot to me. They really resonated me. Now I understand the emotions better, but can I implement them into my life? Can you implement them into your life? And I know we all try very, very hard, but this is a world that, there's ups and downs all the time. This is a lifetime with ups and downs all the time. All that being true, how many of us can actually say we're happy or joyful more than we're not? And I don't know, if we took a poll here, how many of us would say, oh yeah, for the most part, I really feel very, very joyful, very happy, very good about my life. I recently watched a YouTube video by a presenter, and Leslie's going to put this up on the screen later or whatever if anybody wants it, but by a presenter named Robert Waldinger, who was a Zen priest and the fourth director of a 75-year study called What Makes Life Good? Lessons from the Longest Study on Happiness, a way to be happy and healthy as we go through life. The study began in 1938, and it was called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this before. This was all very, very new to me. They asked 724 young men, some were Harvard College students, and the others were some of the poorest, downtrodden people, men from neighborhoods in Boston. They didn't have very good lives. They did not have the wealth and the privilege that these college students, or even the intelligence, level of intelligence that these college students had. They were young men who just lived in households who probably couldn't provide them with the best of everything, as the other college students might have come from better environments. The study began by asking these young men if they would allow themselves to be interviewed, and also if they would take physicals and if they would have their brain scans. So this is a lot to ask of people. I don't know how they got everybody to be on board. I don't know what they promised them in the end, but they were on board. So the study that began in that way, questionnaires were sent out to these young men. So on every 2 years, they would ask these men over the years to fill out these questionnaires and to update their feelings on how their life was going and how happiness entered into their life. So at this point, some did drop out of the study. When the study ends, it is not with the full 724 people that began this study, but I think at the end of the study, 75 years would have been like 2012, only 60 remained. But within that, I'll expand on where, how the study kept continuing. So anyway, at the beginning of the study, when they asked the Harvard students what they were looking for in life, they were looking for to be high achievers. They were looking for the most prestigious jobs, being wealthy, and having lots of things in their lives. The men that they asked from the Boston neighborhood were not of the same insights. I mean, they were not setting their sights to that point, but they also wanted good jobs. They wanted to have things, they wanted materialistic things. So that was 75 years ago that they asked these questions, and that was the answer that they got from the study. 75 years later, or actually it was before 75 years later, by the time these men were in their 50s, and they had gone through many, many years, because this started in 1938, a lot of them went through World War II, whatever. They've been through a lot in their lives. But when they asked them years later, following up on this study, most of them said that what was most important to them was not the jobs they had, not the prestige, not the wealth, but the relationships they made along the way, whether it was their spouses, whether it was their friends. In fact, friends were the most important thing, the relationship. Even at work, they were saying the friends they made at work. So along the way, it was always about the relationships. So this became something to really think about. You could be a college student in Harvard and have the best potential for the best jobs and everything else. But as the years went on, it wasn't about that. It wasn't about any of that. And as the study goes on, they talk about the fact that through the years of these men aging, when some of them became ill, some of them had severe pain, different things that happened in their life, the ones that kept relationships going. And again, I don't want you to think I mean just spouses. I don't. That's not what this study is about. But the ones that kept relationships going, the ones that strengthened their relationships, were the ones who fared better in their aging and lived a happier life. So out of the original study, as I said, 60 finished the study. As years went on, the wives of the original men were asked if they would take part in the study. So you can see how the study kept, even though they were losing people, it kept growing. So these wives were asked, and of course, the way they responded when they were asked was, how come it took you so long? We should have been part of this a long time ago. This isn't just about how men fare and how they become happier with age, or it's about humanity. It's about people becoming happier with their lives. So I think the women were happy to be asked, but indignant that it took them that long to be asked. Well, the study then continues with 2,000 of the offsprings of the original, men, 724 men. So you can see there was a lot of investigation that went on. So now in 2012, the study is coming to a close, and another study pops up, and I'm just going to give you a quick statistic about this, that they did a survey on how many Americans were in 2012 were actually happy with their lives. Only 31% of the population that they surveyed said they were happy. Now, I have to be honest, I was shocked with that. I just could not believe that that number was as low as it was. If you had said to me 50%, if you had said to me 60%, I could have said, yeah, I get that. I get that, because we're not happy all the time, and some of us are never happy. So I could understand that. Well, currently during COVID, there was another survey done, or however they find out these statistics, and it dropped to half that number, that only 14% of the population at this time finds any happiness. So I thought about that number and I said to myself, 14% actually seems higher than I would have expected at this point. So I had to kind of evaluate that. So that could go either way. It could go in a positive way, a negative way. Is the 14% because people are not surrounded with all of their relationships, with all of their connections? Is it part of that? Is the 14% high because, for now, because some people are in their own homes surrounded by all of their family and, having more time to be with their family? So it could go either way when you thought about it. But to me, it was like 14% for COVID seemed high. 31% in 2012 seemed very low to me. So anyway, however you look at this number, it does say to us, what are we going to do post-COVID to find our way back to happiness? A lot of people are without jobs, are without, friends surrounding them. They don't have houses anymore. Different things have happened that have taken us further down. So how post-COVID are we going to bring these numbers back up? How are people going to find their joy and happiness again? And again, it's going to be between reestablishing our relationships. And that's, truthfully what it's about. So I read something that said a group of millennials was asked not so long ago, what would make them happy? 80% said it was to get rich, and 50% said it was to become famous. And I wondered to myself, at what point will these millennials realize, I mean, it took us all a long time, but at what point will they realize that it's not those things in life that will make you happy? We need to have money. We need to have homes. We need to, basically have things that bring us instant joy, if you want to say it that way, but that's not going to sustain happiness. So, more interested in investigating this on my part, I listened to an inspirational talk by Katrina Bloom, who's a psychologist, and this was on TED Talk. And it was called Happiness. You don't find happiness, you create it. So her take is that happiness and well-being is better achieved by controlling our actions and behaviors and less about our thoughts. And I really understood what that meant, because sometimes I say, oh, you know what? I'm going to make myself happy. I am going to believe that I am happy about this and blah, blah, blah. It never works. It never works. And you always think, well, you hear, the more you say the words, the more you'll absorb it. But the theory is that unless you take the action, happiness is not just the words and the thoughts that come out of your mouth. She explained that our brain has a negative bias, which I have heard of this before as calling, you think of the negative before you think of the positive. So according to her findings, that means that the brain has a tendency to highlight the negative, and the positive thinking alone will not change that unless you change into a positive action. So one of her examples is, your brain is concerned with how you survive the day, but less concerned whether you're happy when you survive the day. which makes a lot of sense. So you're just kind of moving through with the thought of surviving the day, not what will make you happy at the end of that day. So basically she's saying that would be considered being like a happy survivor if that's the way your thought pattern went. If we agree that relationships are what brings us true happiness, not wealth, not fame, or not even extreme hard work, it's because experiencing a healthy relationship with friends and family requires an action. In order to be a friend to each other, you have to reach out. You have to do something physically. You have to think about it consciously. So that's why, relationships are so very important. She explains that it's not the number of friends that you have, but it's the quality of the relationships that you make. And in saying that, it's being able to be vulnerable with someone. It's listening to each other's thoughts and sharing what's close in each other's hearts. And that's why, without excluding the men, that's why women are so good at being friends, because we will bare our soul to you. We will tell you more than you want to know, more than you need to know, because we feel that heart connection. That's a little bit harder for men to do. And I don't know why. It's just our makeup. It's just the way we are. It's what's in your heart that really matters in this lifetime, what you feel and how you reach out. She goes on to further explain how a well-functioning relationship is as important to your health and well-being as if you exercised, you dieted, and you thought of living the longest life you could possibly live. So it's about the relationships. She gave an exercise that you don't have to do now, but you might want to try this at some point. And she said she has done this in her clinics, and it really is very significant. She suggests that you send a text message out to a friend. Maybe it's not somebody who I haven't been in contact with so recently, or someone who you just need to connect with. And she said, send out a very kind, happy, uplifting text to somebody and see how they react and how they respond. Dedicate yourself to caring for that person. And when you do that, you'll be amazed to see how they respond to what you've put out there for them. And when you give them that joy, that happiness and joy will come back to you. Again, it's all about relationships, and relationships of every kind. So as you do that, she said, each time you affect a person in that way and you bring them happiness, we know as spiritualists, that energy goes out. That energy goes out to the universe, any positive thoughts, any positive feelings. And she said, and don't stop there. Spread that around and tell people to connect with each other and send out positive, texts, or however you want to connect with people, and see how it starts to affect, your peer group, or your friends, your family. It's a domino effect, and that's basically what she's saying. So here's my story, and I hope you're still hanging in there with me, because I know I'm getting lengthy, and that's just my MO, but whatever. Several nights ago, I was on a Zoom meeting with a creative women's group run by our daughter. I had the opportunity to ask 8 young women who are millennials. Their ages are between, I'd have to say 30 to 40. What made them happy at the age of 19? And some of it was really cute. So I'm just going to tell you how they responded. One said thinking about her future, that made her happy. One said boys, 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 boys. And then another one said drinking a lot with her friends. And a few said just hanging with their friends. And our out of the box daughter, because she is kind of out of the box and we love her for that, said Broadway shows with my family, because we used to take her to a lot of Broadway shows for her. She's very theatrical, for her birthday, for all different holidays. So do you see the pattern here? Even these young people who were talking about happiness, it related to relationships. Even when they were out thinking or drinking, it was drinking with friends. Even when they were thinking boys, 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 it was a bunch of girls looking for boys, boys, boys. So it, again, all about the relationships. So I was proud of them. I was proud of the way they answered me, because I thought, wow, that could have been so different. At the age of 19, I might have said, well, I want to have a really well-paying job, and I want a big, gigantic house, and I want to drive this phenomenal car. And that might have been how I was at 19. Who can remember? That's so long ago. But their answers were more about relationships. When I asked them what made them happy at this age, so they're now in their 30s and 40s, it was such a quick response. It was all about family and friends and relationships. And I love that. And I told them how proud I really was of them, because I expected that to be so different. I expected it to be like the millennials that I told you about earlier, who said fame and fortune and all of that. And it wasn't. So I figured, wow, they're ahead of the game. These are enlightened millennials at this point. So that was very good. So my final attempt at just getting as much information as I could from myself, not even for all of you, because I'm figuring you probably do have a good handle on happiness, but I'm doing this for myself as well. So yesterday morning, I went for a walk, and I said, okay, I'll take my phone with me, my earbuds with me, and I'm going to listen to some kind of a presentation on happiness. And it turned out that it was by, and I'm sure you've heard of this, this speaker before, but it turned out that it was by American author, life coach, and motivational speaker, Tony Robbins. I had heard of him, but I had never listened to any of his, his speeches before, or his talks. And he says, if you're trying to find happiness, you need to feel progress, which I began to really understood what he meant, because I'm at the stage of my life and the age where sometimes I don't feel like there's enough to like drive me to that point of feeling newness and feeling happiness. Things become more status quo. You're retired, you're home, you're in the midst of isolating yourself. There's not much to look forward to. So when he talks about progress, he says, you need to continue to grow. He talks about knowing, and this is what the light bulb went off in my head, and I felt so privileged and enlightened at that moment. He talks about the blueprint of your life. I don't know if any of you have heard of this before. This was all very new to me, but it's the blueprint of your life is called your life story. And he talks about knowing what your blueprint is. And if your blueprint doesn't match your current life condition, then happiness seems out of reach all the time. And this made so much sense to me, because I already knew, and I'll explain that to you later, what my blueprint was. I mean, my blueprint was my story. And if any of you said to me, what's your story? I could recite it in a minute, telling you word for word every single time what my life story was. So if you have a blueprint for your life and your current life condition doesn't match up to your blueprint, then happiness is not easily accessible. When your life matches up with what you thought it should be, then happiness is within your grasp. Life isn't always going to be what you thought it would be. Then you either change your life to kind of meet up with your blueprint, or you basically change your blueprint. And that's pretty much what he's saying. So happiness, in his estimation, is about growing and giving, which takes us from thinking about the me to thinking about the we, which again is about relationships. It's all about relationships. So one of the stories that I want to share with you, and I'm coming to the close of this, I believe, but there's a couple of stories I wanted to share with you. One of them was when Tony Robbins was in the midst of giving a presentation. Afterwards, some people came up to him and talked to him about a friend of theirs who happened to be in a state of depression, wasn't finding life to be what she thought it would be. She was a very successful celebrity. They said she was beautiful. She had tons of friends. She was just the most loving person, but she always seemed to be not happy with her life, having every reason from where we would sit, every reason to be happy. She was not happy. So he told her friend, well, why don't you send her to me? Let me see what I can do. And they said, well, what do you think you could do for her? I mean, she's been on medication for depression. She's been, she's got a great life. What do you think you can do for her? And he goes, whenever I hear somebody being depressed, I know they have not lived out their blueprint. So she comes to be with him, sitting with him. And the first thing she does is apologize to him for not being as happy as she possibly could be. And he goes, you don't have to say that. All I'm care about is your well-being. But he said, let me ask you a couple of questions. Why don't you think you're happy? She goes, I don't know. I have everything in my life to make me happy. I don't know why I'm not happy. And he goes, well, tell me what you thought your life would be. Now, she's been divorced twice, okay? And she said, I always thought I would be married. I would have a wonderful husband. We would have a phenomenal relationship. I would have 2 or 3 kids. They would adore me. We would have the happiest of family life. And she said, and it just didn't happen. And he said, well, what was your ultimate goal? And she said, I wanted to have children. I wanted them to be a big part of my life. And he said, well, why can't you have children? And she said, well, I'm getting to the age where there's no man in my life and I don't, have the ability probably at this age anymore to have children, my own children. And he goes, well, why don't you adopt children? And she goes, oh, no, that they're not part of my bloodline. I want them to be part of my bloodline. And he said, why do they have to be? And she said, because I want them to love me unconditionally. I want them to be with me forever and never leave me and love me more than anything. And he said, well, what would make you think that had to be your biological children? And she said, well, because I want them to love me unconditionally. And how could they if I'm not like their birth parent? And he tried to explain to her that you have the best of friends. You have so much in your life. Change your blueprint, change your life so that maybe it's not exactly like your blueprint was, but it comes darn close. You can have those wonderful children who will love you forever. You can have somebody in your life if that person comes into your life later on. But he did explain that maybe the reason she didn't have a husband in her life was because every time she found a man, all she was projecting was that she wanted to have this man to help her produce these wonderful children. And maybe that was more than he really was looking for. So anyway, but he helped her to understand what her blueprint was, why she wasn't happy, because her life did not fit her blueprint. So pretty much that's kind of how I think I have felt about things in my life. And I don't know if any of you remember the movie Under the Tuscan Sun, because that was a really popular movie years ago, one of my favorite movies. If you think about that movie and the part that Diane Lane played, it's pretty much the same thing. She buys this, she's divorced, she buys this beautiful house, I'm doing the abridged version, villa in Italy, and she ends up where she says, all I want in this house is a family. All I want in this house is a wedding. All I want in this house is love. And she's finding that her life isn't measuring up that way. And then this realtor who had helped her to find this villa says, but look, she had a friend that came over from the United States who was pregnant at the time and ended up staying with her. A baby was born in the house. She ended up where there was a young man who worked for her, and he ended up finding somebody, and they had a wedding at the villa. then later on, she does find love. And he said, all the things that you thought did not exist for you in your blueprint, because I'm using the word blueprint, did exist. They are existing in a different way. Again, about relationships. So on a personal note, I'm just going to tell you this one thing. I realized lately when I kept thinking, why aren't I happy? Why am I feeling so down all the time? That my life, as wonderful as it is, with this great husband, has not matched the blueprint. And now I have to change my thought pattern or my life to fit it. And part of it was, okay, I'm in my late 60s. I have two children, one in her mid 30s, one who's 40. One's married, one isn't. I thought they would both be married. I thought they would both have gobs of children. Ken and I would be grandparents, and we would love the joy of staying young with our grandchildren. And that didn't happen. And Ken reminded me to say that didn't happen yet, but it may not happen. And that has been very, very hard for me. That has taken me out of the blueprint of the person for so many years who thought that at this age, this is what their life would be. So I am learning that now I have to change my blueprint or change my life to fit the blueprint. So that's just really what I've come to learn from this. And I hope that for you, like I said, you may have the greatest of approach towards happiness in your life. For me, it was a little bit more of a struggle and sometimes up and down. But, you know, it's just about really understanding that we have these, probably the blueprint is preconceived notions of what our life should be. And when it doesn't turn out that way, we feel that we've fallen short. But again, if you look back to all of this and realize that it's just about your relationships, and that's the most important thing in your life and what will bring you happiness, then we've all got it. And it's all at our fingertips. And once COVID is over, I keep telling people, I am going to hug and put wet kisses on everybody. I'm going to stick my hands on everybody's food, and I'm going to breathe on them. And that's been my thing so that I can be in contact with friends and family again. I want to leave you with just one more thought and actually a saying from the Dalai Lama, or a thought from the Dalai Lama. Several thoughts from him on our state of happiness. The ability to be happy is in everyone's nature. Happiness is found through love, affection, closeness, and compassion. He goes on to say, happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from our actions. Sometimes we spend too much time thinking about happiness, which I know I do, instead of going out and doing things that actually have the ability to make us happy. When it comes to feeling your best and loving your life, action is more valuable than thought, which is what we've heard before. And it's all about the connections to people. The last thing that I wanted to leave you with was, as I was walking into the laundry room the other day, I thought, well, what is the last thought or the last sentence I want to leave you with? And this was on a little bit of a picture plaque that was given to us. And it's from an inspirational quote from an Italian writer, actor, director. We are each of us angels with only one wing, and we can fly only by embracing each other. I think that is the answer to finding our happy selves, embracing our relationships, and realizing that they're more important than any wealth, than any success, than any fame. And I know for me, this has been an experience exploring this. I hope it wasn't too much too many words or too much information for you. But you know, I've learned a lot by researching this. So I thank you for listening to me, and I hope you all have a very happy day and happy lives. Thank you.